Hello, I'm Katherine Jackson, and along with my co-director for the festival, Virginia Poet Laureate Luisa Igloria, I welcome you to the 43rd Annual ODU Literary Festival. This year, our theme is Grit and Grace. Luisa and I are especially excited about this afternoon's event, having known and worked with both writers during their time at Old Dominion in the MFA Creative Writing Program. We'll get to that quickly, but before that, we want to extend our appreciation for their support to the Edie and Forrest P. White Endowment, the Norfolk Commission on the Arts and Humanities, the Muse Writers Center, the Gay Cultural Studies Program, and the Women's Studies Program, the Women's Studies Department at ODU. We also appreciate the technical support and expertise of the Office of Community Engagement. Without them, we wouldn't be here today. After the two readings, we will have a short question and answer period. Please type your question into the Q&A box, and we will ask as many questions as we have time to do so. To introduce our first reader is poet Remica Bingham, director of the university's Quality Enhancement Plan initiatives and co-director of the festival last year. Remica, if you would turn on your microphone and camera now. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Well, it's only fitting that this year's Lit Fest theme is grit and grace, because I know for a fact that Nishat Ahmed is no stranger to grit, and this is probably the reason he's a poet. I know this because he'd already become a graduate of our illustrious MFA program at ODU. He came back last year to enjoy the Lit Fest just as a welcome community spectator and was glad to be put to work despite this. Because I trust in the way he sees the world, the way he values even small things, I asked him to carry folks from here to there, to count heads, to let us know if there was any unrest among the army of students, any murmurings we could quell to gain favor, so that like him, one day they might, despite all our asking, cherish us and return. Nish is a Bangladeshi American poet, an Illinois native who loves Fall Out Boy and Chipotle and his wife Camille. Nish and I would sit in my office for countless hours over the 2 years that he worked with me as a graduate student, turning over phrases and whatever spirits might guide us in this world or another. He wrote in abundance, finding words for summer storms, invented forms, rewriting death and myths, always occupied with the in-between. His work is the work of many of us moving between worlds and cultures with dark bodies, asking in no uncertain terms, who sees me here? Who'll come for me? I was joyful, but not surprised when he called to tell me about not one, but two collections making their way into the world under all that questioning. His chapbook, Field Guide for End Days, was published by Finishing Line Press earlier this summer. And another chapbook, Brown Boy, will be published by Porkbelly Press this autumn. His work is a handbook for the wondering. It does blend the power of the lyric with the urgency of punk. There's much grit, but also grace. And in his bio, he wants us to know that if there is something worth writing about, worth living for, it's love. Well, our love for him is deep and abiding. Please join me in welcoming Nishat Ahmed. Hey Nish, can you turn on your camera and unmute yourself?
Here I am, trying to hide my tears.
Don't cry through the reading, we love you.
I'll try my best. Thank you, Remica, truly thank you. It's such an honor to be here. I mean, it was crazy that just a couple years ago, I was in the crowd watching some of the greatest of the greats read, learning from the greatest of the greats, such as Remica, Luisa, and Tim Siebels. It's just a privilege to be here to just share some of these words with you. So I'm gonna get into it because I know we got a stack reading coming in right now. But again, I just wanna thank you, Remica, for your guidance, your tutelage for that beautiful intro, and for being one of the first people to see this book in its full form, and being nice and lying and saying, yeah, it's a good book, you should send it out into the world. I'm just kidding. So this book is called Field Guide for End Days, and I wrote it actually most of it after I graduated from the program, and I was just scared because a pretty young person, I'd say, and getting a master's degree and poetry doesn't always guarantee you a job out of school. And so I was just like, okay, maybe the world is ending in a small way or large. And so this book is about how to deal with the end of the world in small ways and large ways. This first poem is called Field Guide for End Days. There is an active shooter in your vicinity. His name is America. And he is hell-bent on putting a bullet in every country. What is home but a place where nothing can find you? Take shelter. Things are falling. Children wish on their flaming streaks. Please, God, don't let the world sink. Have you heard the news? We are guilty of all the good we have never done. This life is coming for us like a hammer, like a gavel. Close your eyes and imagine you could live your life over again. It's too late for that, isn't it? This next poem is also called Field Guide for End Days, and it opens an epigraph from the Fall Out Boy song, What a Catch, Donnie, and the epigraph goes like this. They say the captain goes down with the ship, so when the world ends, will God go down with it? This is your captain speaking. Hello. My name is God. My name is whatever you need it to be. I am just here to let you know we will be crashing soon. Every plane is falling from the sky, and we are the first to land. There will be no survivors. That was never the plan. I never promised you would make it out of here alive. I only promised a chance. If you have anything to say, please say it now. You all have time for one phone call. I used mine to tell you this. And I know that maybe we shouldn't have favorite poems of ours because they're all our children and you shouldn't have favorite kids. But I think that if there's a thing that makes me write, it's the urgency of the fact that one day, no matter what I might believe happens afterwards, my time on this earth is extremely finite. And I think about how every poem might certainly be the last poem you could write, God forbid something happens. And I really enjoyed getting to write a poem about maybe God writing the last poem they get to write and using it still to save us. I think maybe that's an act of love. My dear friend Courtney Tala, who is an amazing poet, asked if I would please read this. And so it's kind of bad for my ego to get requests for poems. But thanks, Courtney, for bumping up the old head. This is a poem called A Litany That Is Just Your Name Repeated. Lover, darling, sweetness, Camille. That soundless sound between wind and chime. It is just your name. Bee balm, goldenrod, gardens, light. Look how the switchgrass twitches at the hand of the breeze. Knees pocked with summer's dirt, a flower you weren't named after, the storm for which you were, your name, a moon in my throat. Night turns to prayer, dawn, a river of honey. I'm gonna need some water before this next poem because it is a doozy. But when I was writing this book, I couldn't have imagined, I wrote this last summer, right? And things were much different then than they are now. And I couldn't have imagined how true some of these things would become. I by no means am a prophet, but perhaps maybe a statistician. And this is a poem called Field Guide for End Days, and it opens with an epigraph from Ilya Kaminsky's Death Republic that goes, "In the 6th month of a disastrous reign, in the house of money, in the street of money, in the city of money, in the country of money, our great country of money, we, forgive us, lived happily during the war." And I think right now, first privileges, many of us are and still trying to do the work of being open to the horrors around us. I think it's still hard to find our place and what we should be doing in this world situation. So this is Field Guide for End Days. The bombs are falling and the walls of money are caving in, but we built our houses out of paper and our people out of paper, and we cut down entire countries of trees just to make empires out of paper. And it's so ironic now that the world is on fire. Everything is on fire. The bombs are on fire, and the fire on the bombs are are also on fire. I shake your hand. Hi, hello, how are you burning today? And grin back and shake my hand and say, oh, fine, burning just fine. And where our palms touch, there is for a moment a pause and some smoke, but then of course there is fire again. And who is dropping the bombs? And why isn't there a place to take shelter? Why aren't the leaders of our country doing anything about the fire? Oh, it's because they are on fire too, and they're made of paper too. They want more walls of money, which are, if you would believe it, made of paper. And that paper is on fire too. And honestly, it's hard to remember anything when our brains are on fire, but I think they told us in school once that paper is a very flammable substance. And when we played rock, paper, scissors, none of us believed paper could actually beat rock. And honestly, I think rock would have been able to keep us from the fire. And no, please don't interrupt me to ask me if this is hell. That's a stupid question. Of course, this isn't hell. This is hell and then some. Anyways, it seems like we were taught at a pretty young age that paper is pretty weak, and we were taught the dangers of fire too. So I guess we should have known this would happen. And if we knew this would happen and did it anyway, I guess it's safe to say that we deserved all of this. This is a poem called Field Guide for End Days. Trace the bodies of the loves you have forgotten. There can be no forgiveness for that which we've forgotten. My mother had a name before she gave me one that I have forgotten. The living become dead while living if they are forgotten. I'm supposed to tell you something about how to survive the end of the world, but I've forgotten. And how important can anything be if it's forgotten? This is a poem called Field Guide for End Days. This poem has already been written, and still I must recite it again. Every act of naming is an act of God. Every act of loving is an act of God. We have been so wrong. This is heaven, and we have been wasting our time bickering over things like gold and silver, honey and meat. We have been so wrong. This is hell, and I have been burning just to tell you this. If you can remember all the names of the people you have ever loved, even when the light has swallowed us, then maybe it was worth the living. So those are poems from my book, Field Guide for End Days, which I believe you can purchase. I think they'll mention that later. And if you do, just know that I say thank you ahead of time if I'm not aware of such purchase, because I know that our pockets are all strapped and such these days. So thank you for spending, right now, thank you for spending time to be here, but thank you for, if you do, for spending some money too on some poems. I got a couple more new ones actually. As Remica said, in my bio, I talk about the fact that nothing is worth writing about or living for besides love. And I think as of late, I've been having a lot of conversations about love and what that means. And I've been having them with my really good friends. And to me, my friends are also lovers. And I know that maybe sounds strange, but I'm in love with my friends. I'm going to say that straight up. I think that they're the most beautiful people on this planet, and I would be incredibly lost without them. And I decided that I was going to start writing this sequence of love poems to them, and not just love poems of friendship, but of romance, because I think that friendship is romance, and I want to hold my friends, and I want to kiss my friends, and I want to dance with them, and I just want to be as close to them as possible. The way I described it to a pal on the phone is that if I could take my friends' hands and just put their fingers in my mouth and get their fingerprints on my tongue, I would love to do that. I would love to know them in a way that no one else could. So I've got a couple poems for some of my best friends. And I tried to open them with songs that I would think that if we were walking down the aisle or taking a dance or something, this would be our song. So this is for MTM. And the song is One Last Night on Earth by Dada Life. And the epigraph goes, streets that have no name, all the lights are turned down low, and the night is here for us. There's a picture somewhere floating on the internet where you and I are staring into each other's eyes, the two freckles on your neck exposed to the camera like a pair of dice. My hand rests on your shoulder, your palm is flush against my ribs. I'd give you the bones of me if I could. I study this photo often, compare the crinkles at the ends of my eyes to how I smile in other photos. Do you remember this night too? The way joy, like a current, ran between us so candidly. I'm sure that night we danced together the way we always do. Our bodies swaying like ships in a sea of people in a crowded room. Maybe you're the head and I'm the heart, and we push and pull for balance. Before the party, you call me into your bathroom, steam still new on the glass. Holding your razor, you ask, will you shave the back of my neck and my shoulders? I run the blades over your skin the way a gull's talons graze water. Every so often, I blow away tufts of curly strands, watching feathers drift to the floor. This is for another one of my best friends in the world. The title of this poem is called KCW, and it opens with an epigraph, also from the song What a Catch Donnie by Fall Out Boy. And the epigraph goes, I got troubled thoughts and the self-esteem to match. What a catch, what a catch. The supercut of this love is every night you've ever made me feel like I was something. If to be loved is to be seen, then you have been watching me forever. On the nights I miss you, I pull a strand of your hair out of my pocket, tie it around my wrist, and pretend this red string is the infinite circle we swim in. The things I would give to be sitting across from you in that dim basement. Now, still, we find ourselves on a bench outside of a pizza pub crying about love. I'm sprawled on your apartment floor while you're on the couch crying about love. You text me at 8 a.m. saying, I'm so sick of talking about anything besides love, and maybe we are meant to do nothing but cry about love. You wrote me a letter before I left the state. I've kept it in my wallet for almost half a decade now. I read it on the bad days. Wherever I go, whenever I hear your name, like a whisper, like a prayer, like a ritual. I will always turn towards the sound, hoping that I might see you. Oh, and something I forgot to mention about these sequence of poems is that they're pseudo-sonnets, because for as much as I love sound, I am garbage at meter, but there are at least 14 lines. So Shakespeare, if you're listening, I'm trying my best. This last poem of this sequence, and I'm hoping to write more, this goes out to MRB, and it opens with an epigraph from the song The Opposite of Us by Big Scary. And the epigraph goes, "You say that you want my love, then I'm a believer. You reach a hand out to me, then I'm gonna hold it. You fill my eyes with your smiles, my brain with your chemicals. It's the hours of the static, your breathing reminding me you're still there. It's you asleep and me imagining the rise and fall. It's the sound of you shuffling in your bed. It's the morning after I dreamt about you so briefly, your body a guitar in my arms, my hands nervous in learning how to play you. It's the way you said my name when you woke, Nish, like a question, like you thought for a moment. There, you know, I come for love. We dive into the heaviness, and this time we come up with love. It's the way you say forever, and I believe you. It's the way we talk about the dreams I have, and it's the way we both hope they include you. It's how we're remembering each other and the way that maybe it scares us. It's all the things we want to say, and when we get close, we let silence do the talking. What are you thinking about? We ask each other, and I think the answer is what we're hoping for. And I've just got one last poem that is a real thing that happened to me. It happened to me, I guess I observed it. And I really am lucky that I sometimes get to see mundane / crazy things that just change my perspective on the world. And I have often a bad habit of talking about my poems too much before I read them and giving away what's going to happen. So I'm not going to say anything else, but just that this is a real thing that happened, and it moved me very greatly. It's called On a Sunny Day. Sky brimming blue and cloudless. A perfectly good umbrella lies on the sidewalk, confidently tossed by someone who looked up and decided for today and for forever, they no longer believe in the rain. And whether or not that person maybe just dropped their umbrella, or maybe they did believe that it might not rain again, I love that moment, and I hope that maybe we can all find moments in our lives that let us believe that the rain might not ever again come. Again, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you that are here listening. It's been a privilege and a pleasure, and to all my friends that have come to watch, know that I love you beyond all words possible. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for that powerful reading. To introduce our next reader is our colleague in the English department, Heather Weddington. Heather, if you would turn on your microphone and camera now.
Thank you. That was gorgeous. So thank you so much for those beautiful poems. I'm here to introduce Joanna. Joanna Eleftheriou is the author of Way Back, a collection of essays that weaves together her and her family's complex history, along with her many identities, American, Greek Cypriot, lesbian, Greek Orthodox, and of course, writer. Joanna is an assistant professor of English at Christopher Newport University, a faculty member at the writing workshops in Greece, and a contributing editor of Assay, a Journal of Nonfiction Studies. She is a graduate of the University of Missouri's PhD program, but before that, she was a graduate of ODU's very own MFA program in creative writing. And because I am also a graduate of that program, that is what I wanted to tell you ever so briefly about today. One of the many, perhaps overzealous things that my friend group in graduate school decided was that each of the students in our cohort followed an archetype, which was laid forth by the students in the cohort before us, and for them, the cohort before that, etc. We had this notion of tracing our newer writerly lineage, as it were, this way back. And so I don't remember any of the other genealogical associations we decided upon, but I know that Joanna was declared my archetype. This was likely because we're both essayists, and also maybe a little bit because we both like to dance. But I held on to this, for me, hopeful connection because Joanna is seriously one of the smartest people I've ever known. She knows all of the words, really all of them. We have a mutual friend who refuses to play Scrabble with her because of this, but she is humble in her pursuit of the right word and the right way to tell her beautiful stories. I couldn't be more proud to welcome back to ODU, this time with her new book in my hands, my friend and my archetype, Joanna Eleftheriou. Joanna, could you turn on your camera and mic and join us?
Thank you, Heather. My Zoom kept thinking that I was trying to talk because I was crying and laughing, as one should when one is receiving the most beautiful introduction possible. Thank you to Louisa and Catherine and everyone who worked to put on this wonderful festival once again, as if no pandemic had even happened. Thank you to everyone who took the time out of their afternoon to watch through yet another screen this beautiful event. It's an honor to be here reading at the place that formed me as a writer. It's an honor to read after Nish. Those poems were beautiful, and I'm so happy that you had the bravery and the courage to say something that I'm actually saying implicitly in my work, which is that we need a deeper and a wider framework than we're usually permitted to talk about love. The essay I'm going to read is from the book, about the middle of the book. I've excerpted it to fit into my 15 minutes. And although not all the sentences that you'll hear were written here in Tidewater, the ending does refer to this beautiful place to which I'm so lucky to have returned. Ithaca's has an epigraph from the Greek modernist poet Gavafi. Wise as you've become and full of experience, you will have understood what Ithaca's mean. I was born with nostalgia in my blood. Immigrants from all parts of the world tell stories of their old country's perfection, but diaspora Greeks hold on to their homeland with a special tenacity. You can't live very long in Greece without hearing songs of the bitter bread and hard, cold beds of xenitia, which means exile, or being far away from Greece. When I had learned enough Greek to understand these songs, I wondered at the pleasure Greeks seemed to take in singing about pain. Like the bite of retsina in their wine, like the moan of bagpipes in their music, longing for an Ithaca, from the distance of Calypso's island still moves the Greeks to sing. And while Odysseus, archetype and father of all homeward wanderers, finally got home and stayed, most Greek emigres take up residence abroad, making xenitia and distance from Ithaca their fate. For Greece is poor. Its soils are barren and its industry unable to make a profit. Greek immigrants in America chink glasses of whiskey and ouzo and remember Mother Greece, the sun-soaked land surrounded by the sparkling Aegean, Mediterranean, Adriatic, and Ionian seas. I was born in America, the world's youngest empire. My earliest memory takes place in one of its states, during a visit my maternal grandfather paid to my house in Queens. I was 18 months old, and so I remember his knee at about my eye level and his shoe reflecting the flames which flicker against the black surface, orange tongues lapping at the toe. I remember the incline of his trousered shin and the brown frame of an armchair, but most of all, the orange flames against that shoe. Such flames would appear before me again much later in a museum screen reproduction of fire raging against the already charred ruins of Smyrni's Greek and Armenian quarters. It was a camera trick, footage of fire superimposed on the photographs of the razed neighborhoods of Smyrni, photographs preserved since mid-September 1922, when the fire drove hundreds of thousands toward the sea. As their city became a charnel house, they waited, as Hemingway described in On the Quay at Smyrni, to become either refugees or ash. The museum was once called the Red Tower because it too was the site of many bloody executions in history. At the time of my earliest memory, of course, I knew nothing of executions or empires or nations or modernity or wars, nothing of ships or Ellis Island or grandfathers, or, for that matter, of fires. That I remember the flames reflected in my Puspiro's shoe at all is the result of the many times I have recalled it, reassembling the scattered members of the moment in remembrance, and created the memory anew, a memory of embers. I remember my Greek American elementary school, St. Nicholas, where American and Greek flags stood at each end of the stage in the school's lunchroom, gym, auditorium, ballroom. For school assemblies, the basketball apparatus was removed and the big round lunch tables snapped flat and tucked behind giant drapes. In the school plays that marked Greek independence celebrations, the tallest boys got to be Ottoman pashas and emissaries of the Sultan. Lavishly turbaned, fake bearded, with plastic sabers in their red satin belts, they would swagger on stage to deliver their threats to the Greeks. The Greeks, in turn, were played by the kids who had learned Greek best, dressed up in 19th century soldiers and symbols of Greek authority-resisting pride. The name for these particular freedom fighters is tsolya, shod in red wooden clogs with large pom-poms on each pointed toe and sporting thick off-white woolen tights. They climbed imaginary mountains in their bright white skirts. Picture a kilt, only shorter, fluffier, almost a masculine tutu, over buttonless, flowing white shirts. They wore royal blue vests embroidered with gold braids, with long rectangles of matching fabric attached loosely at the shoulder to make swinging oblong wings. These were the Greek heroes, the mountain rebels who on every holiday said no to the foreigners, who told the turbaned Turks that they could not have Greek land, could not have Greek women, the females a symbol of home for Greece itself, for the sacred earth to which we trace our lives. The scene I remember best was the reenactment of a time when it seems the no of the Tseliades failed to protect Greek women from the hands of the Turks, so that they had to protect themselves. And so they did, we learned, when in mid-December 1803, the enemy began to close in on a place where a group of women were hiding with their infants. And those women took their children in their arms and ran towards a bluff. Before the pursuers could catch up with them and dishonor them, we never asked our teachers what this meant. The women tightened their kerchiefs, straightened their dresses, and broke into song, dancing in loops toward the cliff. Tracing complicated footwork over snow, dead grass, and rock, they took their last steps. Still free, still honorable, still Greek. And one by one they jumped, singing still. Farewell to you, O poor, suffering world. Farewell to you, sweet life. The music was at once woeful and triumphant, terrible in its sweetness, a keening that is as broken as it is proud. Our teachers, of course, never explained that the women were rejoicing because they had managed, just barely, to escape their enemies' raging lusts by choosing suicide. The teachers simply ordered us to bring dolls to school and clutch them to our chests as we jumped off the stage onto a heap of mats below. It was fun, jumping from the stage in long dresses and headscarves decorated with fake gold coins. Although we didn't understand much about what we were doing, I think we did get a sense that this mysterious dance, like the strange costumes and the language that was so hard to speak without mistakes, was telling us something about where we came from and what made us distinct from the public school kids we played hide and go seek with on our streets. And then my parents were the only ones that actually took us back to this place. So I'm skipping a little ahead in the essay and bringing you to Cyprus. When we first flew to Cyprus, my parents rented us a furnished beach apartment. The next day, we drove 30 minutes up into the Troodos Mountains, where my father's best friend was building us a house. Later, I would find in my father's journals many descriptions of his adventures with this best friend. Andros's name comes up in every second or third entry. Andros and Andreas, my father, went to the cinema together and church together, played backgammon and ate ice cream, cheered each other up when they stayed home with colds. Once, on the first day of Lent, 1959, my father records a school trip up to this very place, Saitas, next to Moniatis, where my father would eventually buy land to fulfill his youthful dream of building a house there for his family. On the lot in Saitas, where the nearly finished house should have stood, our family found only cement foundations in the square shapes of rooms, with rusty steel rods poking out each corner. A few yards down the mountain from the squares, there rose a long wall, also of cement, also with rusty rods poking out. It's a retaining wall and costs a lot, my father explained to my mother when she asked where all our money had gone. My brother and I threw pine cones at each other and scampered up the slope and lay back on the ground, which was soft with its blanket of needles. 20 years later, Andros would be in court declaring bankruptcy. For years, my father waited for the money Andros had gambled away. He said it was taking a long time because the architect had stolen much more money from others and had to wait to pay them back first. In the end, my parents bought a small, already built house in a mountain holiday homes complex near the plot. My father wore his best friend's broken promise like a badge that symbolized the betrayal he felt his country, Cyprus, had committed against him. But you're in Cyprus, my mother argued whenever my father wasn't happy while we lived there. I don't remember how he defended his inability to be happy there. He had believed in Cyprus as a land without a flaw. And as long as he had been in America, he had kept on believing that his country was a paradise. Not too cold and not too hot, he had claimed. Even once we all moved to Cyprus, the cool winters would erase his memory of extreme summer heat, and he would plant American grass as though diligent watering would make it grow as thick as it did in New York. But it never took. Nostalgia comes from two Greek words, nostos, homecoming, and algos, which means pain. The word nostalgia usually refers to the traveler's longing for home, that familiar strain. The traveler's sweet homeward urge is, however, just one of two distinct kinds of pain that the word nostalgia can express. We mourn the loneliness of waiting to get home, but we say nothing of what happens if nostos is achieved. After we find ourselves home, we expect a sudden bliss, but real places disappoint. And upon arrival, we feel not bliss, but algos once again. And this is a different ache, an ache that isn't sung. I went to college in Ithaca, not the Ionian Island, the city in upstate New York. The unending precipitation and relentless cloud cover low, gray, and ugly, hid even that dull strip of Cayuga Lake that on clear days served for me as a glimpse of water to soothe the absence of the Mediterranean. All the Cornell Greeks used to gather on weekends and complain, besotted with yearning for return at a place a little deeper than romance. The Greeks drank too much and danced together and complained about the absence of light and about this gray prison city Ithaca, its people so cheerful and its hills so low. We complained beautifully, ending the nights at 4 a.m. with the nostalgia notes on the guitar. The old songs, the rebetika of refugees from Asia Minor, brought together undergrads, grad students, and professors who all desired their own memory of Greece. The Greeks sang of the sea and of the moonlight, of their country's continuing fall from glory. Give the Greek an empty chair, a tumble full of alcohol or air, and he will dance the zebekiko, the solitary dance of the Byzantine border lords. He tumbles into each next step, tripping, bending, falling, rising just before he hits the floor. Around him in a circle, we clap and bend our necks, not in worship, but in love. And the dancer swings his leg in circles over a stranger's neck. In the summer of 2010, I had just been admitted to a graduate program that came with a 9-month teaching appointment in America and an all expenses paid trip to Greece each summer. Thank you, University of Missouri. I would work for the study abroad program for a month, then fly cheaply to Cyprus. I'll have the best of both worlds, I told my Cypriot friends and family. A salary from America and all summer to read and write by the beach. In a way, it's still a compromise that leaves me where my father spent his life, on the edge of two worlds. In another, it's a way of at once claiming both countries and none. In one of my favorite songs by songwriter Manolis Rasoulis, he writes, "The sweetest homeland is the heart. Its land is made of pain and joy. The heart may be the sweetest homeland, and Greece, as Rasoulis writes, may have taught generations of emigrants to breathe and to die wherever we happen to be. But even as I spend winter after winter in America, the cypress of carob, terebinth, and cyclamen pulls me. I feel that I know who I am through this yearning for the churning of seas, the light of the sun, the slope of a rock, the lift of a wave. I love to run in the heat of an American day and watch sunlight sparkle on water that makes me ache even harder for Cyprus, where I cannot stay. While I run, sweat runs down my face as it does when I run in the sun-parched hills close to my home. I live the new Greek poetry and the old, old stories. I live my myth and my story as I run by the shore of an Atlantic inlet that smells to me like the wide Mediterranean Sea. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you so much, Joanna and Nishat, for such moving and beautiful readings. I just want to say that we are so proud of these writers' accomplishments, especially since they are alumni of our very own MFA Creative Writing program. By the way, I'm Luisa Igloria, and with Catherine Jackson, I'm co-director of this year's ODU Literary Festival. Now, we have time for a few questions for both of our readers. So if members of the audience would like to type those into the QA box, we are going to read them and ask our writers to answer them as time permits. So I'm going to start with a question from Courtney. And she also starts by saying, this is for Nish. Nish, dear friend, I love you and thank you for reading my poem request. I'm so impressed with the fact that a majority of Field Guide was written after the MFA and came so soon after you graduated. Would you talk a little about how you managed to keep yourself productive post-MFA, and how you were able to balance the writing life and the working life.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm getting my computer's saying my connection is unstable, so just want to make sure. Courtney, I love you. Thanks for requesting that poem. I would say that I don't know if I've managed to keep myself productive. I think that it's out of necessity to a degree. I think that it's really easy for life after the MFA to just swoop you up into the 9 to 5 or the 9 to whatever, and then you just have to like work all day. You come home tired, and so oftentimes the creative engine is exhausted, right? Because I think that, I mean, maybe for others it's not the same, but for me to enter the poem space, I'm doing a lot of emotional work, though sometimes it's good. It's still hard to do that work, right? And we have things to do, like make dinner, eat food, we have people to attend to in our lives. And so I think that Field Guide was written in like 2 weeks actually, and it was in that span before I had anything to do. And I think that in that downtime I thought to myself, I was just like, oh, like I just need to get these out. And I think that's how I write a lot, is that I just find spurts and moments where a lot of things come at once. But I think that also we think about, I just think that writing doesn't have to be always the act of writing. And I think that a lot of our mentors will say the same, that the way that we live our lives are a means of writing too. Like most of my poems recently, these poems from my friends are from conversations or from just moments we spent together. And even though in that moment I'm not writing the poem is living in the way that we're loving each other and being with each other. And so I think that that's how you make time, is by actually making time for the people that make you want to write poetry. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you for that practical advice and also very personal perspective. We appreciate it. This is a question from Susan. She says, thank you to all the readers and hosts. This is a question for Joanna. I admire the weave of time in this piece, past, present, future, moving almost simultaneously. But my question is about research. Can you comment on delving into the family archives, for example, your father's journals? How did you find those? And what was the experience of reading them like for you?
Wow, thank you. What a great question. That's really great. It's so similar to what Nish said. Life gives you some. My baby, this just came out. I'm so happy to get to be here. Life gives you some gifts, and I think I'm thinking in similar terms with my co-reader, in that similar to the way we pray, in the sense that we're always open to feeling ready to pray. We're also always open for how to incorporate the gifts that life gives us. So it just so when my father passed away, those journals were there. And actually the first essay in the book, I kind of wanted to read it because I read my father's journal as the work of mourning. I can remember what it says. I say that, so I got the journals and then I felt like I could mourn. So the mourning my father is the first essay, burying him. And then I take the journals and I read those days, and I typed it in Greek and then I translated it. And that was what I needed to do. And my acceptance of I wrote my entire thesis about my father's, Luisa was my wonderful, one of my thesis readers. So I mourned him in an entire thesis, and then I got to some more. So it was actually relatively easy to accept my father's loss. Anyway, so that I found them, and I think there was nothing like compromising in them. So it was really easy. And then a lot of the other research is actually on the internet. The Ellis Island archives, you don't even have to pay, just give them your email address. And one more thing that I would urge other fellow writers, you go places and you bring a foil. Because you need to have conversations. So like I have an essay that's kind of self-conscious. Right after my father died, I was in Cyprus and I was like, I want to go to this village that's famous for its lace. And like, I was like, Mom, can we go? And we go together, and I'm like talking to her about the lace so it can come out. So a lot of the information can come out in dialogue. So similar niche, use people to become characters. Like, hey, I want to be a character in my essay. Let's go do something.
It's just wonderful. I have a question from Jesse, and I think this question was meant for Joanna, but I think that both of you could answer this question as well. So the question refers to your essay in the early section about the first memory and how lyrically you invoke the creation of memory. And the question asks you to talk a little bit about the relationship between invention, imagination, and memory when writing about the past. So both Joanna and Nishat may answer this question.
Well, thank Jessie for being here. She's a colleague up at Hollins College. So really happy to have you here. And something that I did when I was in my MFA, I would bring dried thyme from the actual Cypriot Mountains and sniff it, and it would transport me back there. And I could find myself there, and that like energized all the other senses. And then I felt myself remembering things that I didn't expect to remember. And that's another thing that we tell our students when they say, I can't remember anything. You'd be surprised how much you remember once you start writing. And then another task of us nonfiction writers that maybe, and I'm curious to see how the poets negotiate the same question. We as nonfiction writers, when we make something up because we're in that space and state of sensory, memory, kind of energy, I notice myself, like I have a line where I explain that I imagine my grandfather wearing a fez because he was born in Turkey, but I never saw that and there's no photograph of that. So I recognize that something was produced by my imagination, and I'm licensed to describe those very vivid made up memories, providing I let my reader know. And I think that's part of what is becoming a convention of the genre even. But how does poetry is similar and different?
I think there's, with poetry at least, there's a little more leeway because I feel like, though I think there's a lot of creative room in nonfiction, and I try to write CNF too, and I believe that CNF, I think Mike Pearson put it as, it's not about what is the capital T truth, but what's your truth, right? And I think with poetry, there's a little more room to kind of already start with a more fudged line of the truth, because it's more about the truth of what the thing is, not what happened per se, if that makes sense. And I think for me, the way I've negotiated, maybe not making up things, but for a past that maybe my memory is foggy on, to still say, well, am I orbiting the right thing, right? Maybe if I'm not exactly on the Earth's surface, but if I'm somewhere in the clouds by it, I think I'm close enough to saying, okay, this is what it is, at least for me. And that's the thing too, right? It's what it is for me. I'm not writing anyone else's perspective. I'm writing my own, and anyone else is welcome to come and write their own thing to disagree with that or challenge that. And I welcome that because we all live in our respective realities, right?
A nice connection with the previous question that I'd like to just add to Nisha's comment is that we can do research to find out what happened. And then actually, if we find that our memory differs from what the facts tell us, then we can explore why we misremember and what meaning is in the invented memory.
Mm-hmm.
So we are at the end of our program, actually. There may not be time for the other questions, but I know that you have touched a lot of our readers and audience members. And so thank you again from Catherine and myself and everybody that had anything to do with the festival. It's been a wonderful program listening to the fullness of your words. And I just want to say to everyone in the audience, please come back at 7 p.m. tonight for our last program today featuring Maggie Smith. So thank you again, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.